Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Ladies and gents, welcome back. This is your host, Eric. Today I'm joined by Anna from Anna Alpha Fit. Anna, thanks for coming on the show with us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to jump into it. Recently put out a poll to followers, listeners. What do you want to hear more of? You know, we do talk about wellness, leadership, all these ins and outs, and specifically the different aspects of wellness, health. And there was a pretty strong request for like what you'd expect, which is like the physical fitness, health routines. And so I'm excited to bring you in specifically following that and that kind of feedback because certainly we need more of it. And I don't even remember how I found your page, but you know, for you to have a first responder background as a paramedic, you're on there doing all the tactical athlete stuff. So we'll get into that too. And then just putting out a lot of very helpful content with health, fitness, nutrition, all the good stuff that we can all use a lot more of.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. You know, sometimes you're posting to just whoever, and you just don't really know the impact that it has. So it's nice to hear someone else who's in first responding to understand like how important this is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I found I suppose like my jump start in the journey of fitness that's ongoing in first responder work. Like I didn't grow up as an active kid or really with a lot of the healthy routines or the awareness, and just getting into it for the purpose of wanting to optimize and be really effective out there. And then just totally nerding out. So I love that we're connecting on all that. So I suppose like I'm curious, was that always an interest and part of your life as far as sports or fitness, things like that?
Yeah, so for me, I actually, like, ever since I can remember, have been involved in some kind of athletics. I grew up in a military family, so my dad was in the special forces in the army, and so the culture of the household was very much um, like centered around fitness and nutrition, honestly. Like
Love
I
it.
didn't really understand that when I was a kid. I just kind of
Mm.
thought, we need to eat healthy. And my dad would take us on for runs and for rucks and like all this stuff. And I just thought it was fun. But as I've gotten older, I've definitely carried that into my adulthood. I swam my whole life, went to college and swam. So being fit for my athletics was has always been a thing. And then coming out of that as an adult, it was just kind of like who I was at that point. It was just like such a center of my personality, to be
Mhm.
honest. And so getting out and then trying to find my job after college and trying to find a job that fit my personality, which is very much like type A, very, I like to be active, obviously. And so finding jobs that fit that just kind of like helped me continue the habit of staying fit and somewhat healthy with my nutrition.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. Our daughter's almost 5, and like I post videos sometimes, but like whenever I'd be working out, she would just kind of be messing around doing the similar thing, right? Whether it was like pushing a cart, and then when she was a toddler, she started like putting weights in it. And at first, we put one weight in it just to keep it steady, truly.
Yeah.
Like not trying to indoctrinate her, but it is fun to hear these like healthy habits and mentalities rub off. Like literally on the way to daycare today, she was asking me if coffee was healthy. And I was like, well, it can be if you don't add all this stuff. And most people think it is. She's like, maybe I'll drink coffee when I'm older. I don't know. I don't really like the smell. I'm like, okay, like that's for you to decide. Then she asked me if like beer and wine are healthy because my wife and I enjoy a little bit here and there. I'm like, yeah, generally not. She's like, okay, good. I don't want it. And so it's just like,
Good news.
yeah, she's not this health freak or anything. She's not
Yeah.
super active as a kid, but it's fun to hear these things or like resonating with her as far as saying things like, I want to eat and drink things that are healthy for me and good for my body. We're like, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I truly believe that that kind of part of someone's identity begins in childhood. A lot of what I do with my clients is trying to rewire the way they identify
Mm,
and who they are and what they do as being somebody who is healthy, who does exercise no matter what. And so I'm really, really fortunate to have just been indoctrinated pretty much like since I could remember. So it's never really been an issue for me, I guess, in that sense, which is
yeah.
really nice. Yeah.
Man, I just think that's so huge, and I want to spend a little moment on that. But yeah, identity. I love that because recently I was talking about how if people just decide that they like the idea of running, and but they've never been into it, they always felt bad at it, and all these things. Like all you literally need to do is just decide that you're a runner, go run down the block, even if you make it halfway, and then you start walking. Like, cool, you're a runner, right? Like you don't have to qualify it with any certain thing or comparison, and I think that's the trap we get into. But like truly, like it starts there. And I love how you literally put out like, hey, just start small, start with something.
Yes, start with something. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think a huge issue, especially in the first responder and like military community, is wanting to either do it perfectly or not doing it at all. So trying to preach as much as I can to these people who do shift work, who don't have a lot of time, preach like, something is better than nothing. And you're right, like identifying as someone who is healthy is just, I give an example to my clients all the time of like smoking, like someone who identifies as a smoker isn't going to quit smoking unless I
Mm,
identify as somebody who doesn't smoke. So
yeah.
as frequently. So that's such a huge portion of how someone develops like the healthy habits and breaking out of that like perfectionism is just the small things and identifying with who you want to be and maybe not necessarily who you currently are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. And like maybe a way to expand that, and because I'm working with a small group on like mindset and just literally saying like, hey, I am a person who is quitting smoking, or I am like the future me is not a smoker, and this is
Hmm.
one day closer to that. And certainly you could build that into anything. Like maybe you don't feel like a fit person, but you could say, hey, I'm a person that is hardworking and cares about myself and is gonna invest in myself and is on the path of health, right? Like I am a healthy minded person, and now I'm going to expand that into like my physical being.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just what you're saying. Like every decision you make will be pretty much revolved around like, is this healthy for me or isn't this healthy for me? And when you do mess up, it's not like something so detrimental that will throw you completely off course. Like a smoker having a cigarette, like, oops, I don't smoke, but I had one, versus somebody who's like, I'm a smoker and I messed up. And oh, now, like the negative thought spiral from there can really deter somebody. So
Hmm.
that's so huge.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, going back to your athlete days, there are the athletes that are pretty dialed in with routines and food and nutrition, and then there are those that quote unquote get away with it because you have so much output, like caloric output, and your metabolism and your is firing because you're younger. Where did you fall in that, and was that always a comfortable space for you as far as learning nutrition, or did that come later?
That is such a great question because it's something that I actually talk about all the time because there's a huge gap in a lot of areas when it comes to like educating people, either performance nutrition or just overall wellness, but performance nutrition specifically in adolescence. There's a huge gap in education on like what should you be doing because the only thing that I ever heard growing up when I was in high school, elementary school, middle school was eat everything you can, right? Like you're gonna
Mm,
carb load before like my swim
yeah.
meets, like it would be like everybody's having spaghetti dinner and like all this stuff. And there's just such a lack of preaching for like hydration, for example, protein, like all that stuff, like the protein needs for children still exist, but it was non-existent conversation. So when I always knew that it was something that I should be aware of. So like in my house, the extent of nutrition was pretty much like, you're going to eat your vegetables at dinner. We're only going to have dessert after dinner, if you eat your dinner, and then we're going to limit sugar to the weekends, stuff like that. And we're going to go for long hikes after or whatever. So sugar to me was always something, you want to minimize as much as possible. So soft drinks, chips, junk food, stuff like that, was never something that I had a whole lot of draw towards. So
Mm,
that definitely gave me an advantage for like my physique and like body composition. Even from like when I was little, my coaches used to just comment on like how much more muscular I was, just like compared to the other kids my age.
mm-hmm.
And partly genetics does play a role in that, but I truly believe it's also just the fact that like I was served like pork chops and potatoes for dinner and stuff like that, and not like pizza and ramen and just like carbs and fats.
Yeah.
um I think that played a huge role in my ability to develop my talent, because I definitely wasn't like, as an athlete, I wasn't like the most talented person in the pool, or in the weight room or whatever, but I would definitely like was the person that pushed the hardest and tried the most, because again, my dad was special forces, like that's what he was indoctrinated with. He was like, you never quit, you never complain, never make excuses. You don't drag anyone down with you when you're in a dark place, kind of thing. You put your head down and you do what you got to do, and you even if you're not the best, you make sure that you tried the hardest. And so that was me. And then like kind of perfecting my nutrition and really dialing in and getting to educate myself didn't start till college, when I realized that my effort wasn't putting me in the position that I wanted to be
Mm,
in like the national standings. I like, with the effort I was putting in, my coaches were kind of like, Anna, you're pretty skinny at this point. Like you need to put on a lot of weight. Like you need to put on some muscle. Like you need to come back after the summertime, and I want to see some muscle on you. And I was like, man, I really don't know how to do that. Like I thought I was trying as hard as I could in the weight room and all this stuff, but there's something missing. And then
mm,
literally, I don't even know. It just dawned on me one day, like I think I need to start thinking about my nutrition, or at least start looking into it, because that is the only thing that none of my peers are doing, right? Like everybody is going to practice, everybody's lifting weights, we're all trying our best, but like, what's the one thing that nobody else is doing? And I thought, nobody else is really thinking about what they're eating. So that's when I started looking into it. And that is when everything changed for me. Like I came back after summer vacation, my coaches were literally like, who is that? Like, what
mm.
happened to Anna? I went like, I
Like
dropped so
leveled
much.
up.
I leveled up, and it was such a night and day difference, that was really where like my passion for how impactful changing your nutrition can be as an athlete, how it can just level you up in every aspect and area of your life. And so I excelled more than I thought I could, in my sport, which definitely motivated me to continue the habits that I created when I was in school.
Yeah, yeah. What were the key things that you gained, like maybe that off season that you put into practice?
So I really dived into how much food should I actually be eating,
Mm,
um, because typically college athletes are eating to satiety, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's hard when you have a really high volume of um, activity. So like we were, for example, just to give for reference, like we had morning practice, which ranged from 2 to 2.5 hours. We would go to class all day long, and then in the afternoon we would have like 3 to 3.5 hours worth of practice, which consisted of like cross training, swimming, like a bunch of different stuff. But it was a lot. So when you have that level of fitness, the hunger hormones are kind of pushed to the side, and you're not as hungry, and there's just not a lot of time to eat. And so most of what I found was I wasn't eating enough,
mm,
and I wasn't eating enough of the right things, specifically protein. So one, I started eating more, but specifically protein second, and third, this this might seem kind of like duh, but drinking, like, I mean, recovery and alcohol in college, I mean, you kind of know like, oh, you get a hangover, but like the hormonal effects of alcohol, like the days after, like the effects that it has on your sleep, it was so much more than like anybody ever talked about. It
Yeah,
was
it's
pretty much like
crazy.
don't get in trouble is how alcohol went in college.
Mm,
So when I started cutting alcohol and really like diving deeper into my recovery and sleep, it allowed me to show up to practice and try that much harder and push that much more. And cutting back on processed food. That was like the big thing. So, like in cafeterias in school, there's a lot of like processed food. Like everybody typically will go for like the stuff that tastes good, like pizza, pasta, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's like covered in cheese. It's like,
mm-hmm.
covered in like sausage and stuff. And so when I started eating more of the chicken and rice, making myself like lean turkey sandwiches, and for breakfast having like eggs and potatoes, like the the muscle gain increased exponentially and I lost any of like the fat that I had. So when you're a swimmer, it doesn't help you to have any kind of like extra mass. So the more lean that you can be, the quicker that you can be. And especially with me, I was a sprinter. And so being really strong and really lean and fit
Mm,
definitely helped me in my specific events. So just kind of being mindful of those things. I wasn't necessarily tracking my food at that time, but just being mindful of like, hey, I need to eat 3 meals a day. I need to have a snack before practice and after practice, and sometimes during practice if I need to. Not go more than 4 hours without eating. Those kinds of rules I just kind of applied, and it was incredible the night and day difference.
yeah. I think there's a lot of really good takeaways, and I'll try to summarize them and expand on some of them because there definitely is an audience of, I mean, they're generally younger, first responders, male and female, that recognize that they want to put on some muscle. They're not the biggest frames, right? So they want a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more strength. So if it's an officer, yeah, you want more weight, you want more mass so that you can subdue somebody, right? Because size can be advantageous if it's good, right? If it's good
Mm-hmm.
size, like muscle mass.
Mm-hmm.
Fire's the same, right? Like you have smaller framed men and women that are like, hey, it's going to be a lot easier to lug around all this equipment or drag this hose if I have a little bit more weight, right? So again, the good weight. And so, you have these quote unquote hard gainers and such. So I think
Yes.
that those are really helpful reminders is that, hey, like through the years, a lot of people have asked because I learned by doing and kind of experimenting, but they're like, hey, like, what are your thoughts? I'm in the gym, I'm working hard and I'm doing these lifts. What, like, yeah, everything sounds good, but you need to eat more. How much are you eating? Well, I eat a lot. And I don't know how often you hear that from people you work with, but
All the
it feels like
time.
you
Yeah.
eat a lot, but like quantify, like put a measure on there. And then generally it's like they skip meals because the shift is busy.
Yes.
And maybe that's a perfect transition into one. Um, I always recommended MyFitnessPal as kind of like an easy app to start downloading.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have something that you prefer? And then maybe we can get into the shift work struggles, right? Because you're busy, you're in a back of a
Yes.
truck all day, like all night, whatever. Like, how do you get in those valuable calories and healthy
Yes.
nutrients?
Yes. That was yeah, we'll definitely dive into that because that was a whole different kind of transition going from being able to eat whenever to like literally not being at the mercy of like dispatch.
Yeah.
But my favorite app is probably going to be Chronometer.
Mm,
So, MyFitnessPal is the other one that I recommend, but my first one that I typically recommend is called Chronometer. And it just has less ads. It has a pretty wide database. You can use the barcode and scan things. I know like a lot of people have qualms with the MyFitnessPal now because it pretty much forces you to get the premium version. But
oh yeah, see, like that, I'll insert that. I used it some time ago when it was free, and you could scan things, and you could
yes,
program your own kind of your own custom meal to make it
yeah.
easy to add all that stuff. So yeah, it's been a bit.
Yeah, the usability, they're just making it a lot harder, trying to obviously like get some more money. And
Hmm.
so I typically steer towards Chronometer. But MyFitnessPal has been around a long time, so the database is huge. So you can usually find literally anything. Like there's nothing you can't find on MyFitnessPal because it's just been around for so long.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for those listening in, like, hey, just start somewhere. Even if you approximate it, you'd use like a visual cue, or you weigh your protein at home, and you're like, okay, it's basically the same. Yes, we do know for people that weigh stuff, there's a lot of variability. Yeah, like what is a spoonful of peanut butter? and on, right? That can vary. Like it can
Hmm.
basically double that calorie
That's a whole
intake.
podcast on its own.
Yeah, right. Like using a scale,
Yeah.
but like, hey, it's gonna give you like a basis, and at least you have a sense of how many meals you're having, of a general sense of like protein, right? So, but I mean, that's just to try to get people to enter into the routine. I think it's so huge when people actually make the commitment, like buy the $10 food scale and start weighing your stuff and start tracking it, and you'll be like amazingly aware of how much or how little you eat, and then where those calories are coming from, like how many grams of protein you're getting and on.
Yes, exactly. Like that, you learn so much about how many grams of protein are in 5 ounces of chicken, or like, that's what I love is my clients to just learn about the food that they're eating, not necessarily like, I mean, yes, I do typically prescribe, it's called flexible dieting. So I typically use flexible dieting for macro tracking and calorie counting and things like that. But with clients who have never done that before and it's daunting, I'm like, listen, all I want you to do is just kind of try it out and
Hmm.
learn about how much carbs are in a bagel,
Yeah.
how many carbs are in a fruit, and just use that to, I guess, learn what like kind of foods feel good, what foods don't necessarily feel as good. Like, oh, this pasta had 100 grams of carbs in it. That's why I don't feel so good. So just making connections like that with the food that they're eating, it does bring a lot of awareness to the calories as well. So it's
Yeah.
it's definitely important.
Yeah, for sure. And even if you're like making a healthy kind of whole food-ish based meal at home, let's say you're making like a burrito bowl kind of thing, and you got rice, you got beans, you have some leaner protein, like just to measure it out, it might be actually really liberating, because if you got that thing at a restaurant, you're going to get a ton of rice, ton of beans, they're going to skimp
Yeah.
you on the protein, and
Uh-huh.
that might not be a desirable ratio for you. You might be like, man, I want more meat. And then you make it a certain way at home. You're like, okay, I don't need literally two fistfuls of rice. Like, I'm good with
Right.
kind of like half to like a fistful, right? Or like a solid cup is like great.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be super crazy,
Right. Doesn't have to be crazy
bad
and
diets or
so much more
anything.
satiated. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
you can learn what makes you feel full. You can learn what like spikes your blood sugar or what makes you feel a
Mhm.
little bit groggy or like yeah, restaurant eating too, learning like a lot of my clients will text me or whatever after they've been working with me for a little while and they'll be like, I ate out with my girlfriends this weekend and I can't tell you how terrible I feel. I had no idea that like, the food I was eating was affecting me this much. I didn't even know until I started meal prepping and tracking my calories.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that it's kind of like that death by a thousand cuts, and like when you're in it, you're in it. And maybe a
Uh-huh.
better metaphor is like, the frog in hot water that's about to be boiling. It's like you just get acclimated. And
Yeah.
I mean, I felt that so much when I did, and I go through periods where I get a little bit more dialed in, or I go through periods where I cut something out. And
Hmm.
man, like you notice when you're on the more straight and narrow how much greasy meal out, all the
Yeah.
hydrogenated vegetable oil, like, how just a gut bomb. Whereas you're like, man, I used to eat
Uh-huh.
this like a couple times a week and it didn't phase me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, such a thing.
Yeah. I remember like again with my childhood, I remember we would like go to McDonald's like sometimes and I just remember as a kid being like, "Oh, I like just telling my parents like I literally feel like I can't move, you know?
Hmm.
So, I mean, kids can make that connection if you won't put them on like some kind of more whole foods based diet. And starting that young, they can kind of start learning about their food from there. It's really
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so to pivot back to your life as a first responder, when you got into
Yeah.
paramedic work, I mean, I'll even throw in, because as a cop, I generally recommend like, hey, have some go-to snacks that you carry in your patrol bag next to you. And as a cop, like, yeah, it's not crazy to rip open a little serving or a Ziploc of almonds and you don't even have to touch them, right? But like, there's such a layer of when you're working in the medical field, especially out in the field, like, yeah, sanitary and sterile environment. So like, that's just what's popping into my mind of like, it is so much harder for you all to just grab a snack.
That's so funny. Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw that at you, see if you have any tips on that, and then we can get into like, yeah, like how to even manage
Yeah.
intake of nutrients amidst the craziness of the shift and what it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. That was really hard to navigate at first. But I definitely through trial and error, I think I kind of perfected it in a way. Like I moved to New Orleans and worked for New Orleans EMS, and they are a very busy metropolitan
I bet.
agency. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, I thought the area I lived in was rough, and then I moved there, and I was like, whoa, it was just such a different experience. I learned so much, but one of the things was, how do you eat when everything is hitting the fan?
Hmm.
Because you can't go. I'm not a huge fan of going all shift without eating because that's just going to perpetuate like poor decision making after work,
Yeah.
which is where a lot of people mess up. But one of my favorite things to do when you're on the truck, maybe like dispatch isn't giving you a break and you're just like go, go, go all the time, is I always tell people like exactly what you said with your patrol bag is like put snacks in your like pants pockets. I'll
Mm.
tell my fire guys to put them in their turnout gear. Eat your only pack things that either come in a package or things that you can eat with a gloved hand.
Mm.
So you can pretty much eat anything driving down the road with a gloved hand. If it, you know, if it's like almonds, like you said, I tell people like cubes of cheese or grapes, a granola bar, a protein bar, something like that. Having a water bottle that has a straw on it because you can't drive emergency traffic trying to drink out of like a water bottle with
Yeah,
like
you
a
probably shouldn't be
giant.
tipping your head back. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't tip your head back. And so a lot of people also get really dehydrated. And so just like the little tip of like get a water bottle with a straw made a huge difference in my hydration. And then like having a protein shake or something next to you, something you can drink, like liquid calories can definitely help too. And it'll minimize the chance of you going to the hospital and eating like the snacks there or like the snacks in the break room, like at your station or whatever, that are usually really calorically dense and high in sugar and like
Yeah.
are super processed. So
Those are such good tips. Yeah. So imagine that, right? Like, just imagine not having to sanitize your hands, right? Like, just fresh pair of gloves. You can peel, a wrapper of like a decent macro or decent ingredient protein bar, that kind of thing.
yeah,
I think that's a great
yeah,
tip.
yeah. And like to go back to like when you're like the what you said about tracking, if you pre-track, I tell a lot of my shift workers is like you want to find out how many calories you should be eating and then go into your MyFitnessPal before you get to shift and track what you're going to eat that day. Pre-planning can definitely help so much. First of all, relieving like any kind of decision. So the decision fatigue that you get throughout the day is pretty exponential by the end of it.
Hmm.
And so taking off that mental load can help so much. Going into work with all of the calories that you need for the day, like in snack packets. I'll tell my clients who do shift work in really busy areas, like you need a snack every 2 hours. Like when you need to plan on everything hitting the fan and you not leaving the truck all day long. And so, if you think about it, you're probably going to have a call about every hour to an hour and a half. And so you want to be having a snack between calls, maybe every 2 hours. And so that will allow someone to plan, okay, hey, like if I have a 14-hour shift, I need 7 snacks, and then they can go into their MyFitnessPal, log 7 kinds of snacks, make sure that it's like kind of matching the calorie count that they have. And then they don't have to think about anything. They just have to reach in their pocket and eat whatever they have.
Yeah, and that's such a big deal. It's a decent theme when cops talk about go bags, right? And so you could be on a violent kind of containment spot, and you might have that kind of sling bag where you have a couple extra ammo magazines, you have some
Mhm.
med gear, but then generally it's recommended like, hey, throw like a little water bottle in there, maybe a protein bar or two, like a Cliff Bar, something that's like you could leave it in there for years. Yeah, it might be
Yes.
hard, but it's gonna be. Yeah, you don't want your blood sugar to dip
No.
in this moment. Yeah, for like hours, like you need to be dialed in. Like you need
Yes.
to not fatigue, because it might be 2 hours in and then the suspect comes out towards you, then what, right?
Yes. Yeah. Cognitively, eating is so, so important. And you don't want to become a patient yourself. Like that's what I tell people all the time. Like, you don't want to have like a glycemic emergency. Like, you don't want to be, having low blood sugar on scene. I've seen this happen. It's crazy. And I'm like, dude, here's a snack. Like, I got you. Like, I've got some snacks with me. But like, I tell my fire guys, because a lot of them also, they'll be on like scene for like a car accident for hours. And I'm like, you're standing in the hot sun in your turnout gear, like on the side of a road. Like, can you, like, you can put maybe like a goo. You can put like some kind of packet of literally like gummy bears or something, but any kind of sugar is going to like save you from becoming a patient of like heat exhaustion or something.
Yeah, yeah, and this goes right back into a point you made a little bit earlier, where you're talking about planning your day and how that can help you avoid some of these pitfalls. And like certainly when you're fatigued, you're stressed. If you haven't eaten all shift or whatnot, and then you get to the hospital and there's like the vending machine, which by the way, like I just had to take a moment to vent about hospital food. WTF? Why is
Oh my gosh,
general
it's so
hospital food
frustrating.
so bad for you? Like you get sick people that are trying to get better and you're gonna feed them garbage. But I divert. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
digress.
agree.
But yeah, so when you talk about that, I think that's so huge, and I think a theme that I like to nudge people and remind people is just to know yourself and know where you've been. A lot of us have had really unhealthy eating patterns at one point or another in our lives, right? Like I grew up kind of a latchkey kid, like love my love my mom. She's doing what she could, like grinding, for me and my
Hmm.
sister. But and she set limits, right, on the things we're supposed to eat, but certainly like we went full bore and tried to hide the evidence and stuff. But
Uh-huh.
I'd crush a sleeve of Oreos with my sister, just like, just
Uh-huh.
half a thing of goldfish, whatever. But yeah, we can have these really unhealthy tendencies, and I think that for a lot of people that do lean into health, like at least I'll speak for myself. I've experimented with things like fasting, intermittent fasting, and I have felt that desire to binge, like at the end of it. And especially when you have nothing, then you feel so insatiable. And so I just throw that out there just to say, hey, like everyone's different. And it's not to say you can't kind of build a fast into your shift work. Like certainly like it might work really well with some people maintaining like stable energy levels, but don't mess around. I will invite you to not mess around with it and start toying with it while you're on shift. If you have this critical, first responder job, like maybe mess around with it on your time off when you're doing stuff around the house and just in a lower risk environment, right? As you
Yeah.
acclimate in and you get into ketosis or whatever you're doing. But yeah, I just want to throw that out there and see what your thoughts are on that.
Honestly, you hit the nail on the head. It's hilarious. Like the number of times I had a coworker be like on shit, like beginning of shift, be like, "Oh, I'm not eating today. I'm starting keto," or "Oh, I'm not eating today. I'm starting intermittent fasting." I'm like, you literally had Domino's last night, and you're just gonna not eat
Mm.
till like, and we're gonna go and do like some crazy shit
Which
all
will make
day, and
it
like,
harder. Yeah, which will make it harder because you had so many carbs, right? It's not like you went like low
yeah,
carb last night and then you're gonna
right, yeah.
ease into like a longer gap.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's exactly like people have tendencies. So they have like they'll eat something they think is bad, so they'll feel shame. And so
Mm.
they'll come to work and they'll be like, "Oh, I know how to fix it. I just won't eat. I just won't eat until like a certain period of time." And then what happens? They go into the break room, there's donuts or there's like catered Mexican food with queso, and they're like, any human being is not going to be able to say no to that. It's like wired into our DNA to have no self-control in that moment. If you're hungry and there's something like really caloric in front of you, you're supposed to eat it. Like that's how we survived as human beings. And so,
Hmm.
like the willpower when you're really stressed, really busy, like cortisol is going, adrenaline's going, you have no time, and there's food in front of you. Like, don't get me started on hospital food. Like, it literally sets everyone up for failure, turning into patients themselves, just perpetuating that like cycle of, um, you know, the hospital and big pharma and all that stuff. But it's it really just again planning. Like if you're gonna try it on your day off, like you said.
Hmm.
Like try it on a stretch of a 3 day or something. Like don't go into a shift thinking that you're gonna try something new and hope for the best. Because I always try to tell people like when you go into a shift as a paramedic or EMT or LEO, I always go into it thinking that it's going to be the worst day ever because I'll never be disappointed if I go into it. A lot of people go into to a day thinking, I really hope, we don't get any calls today, or I really hope we don't get this specific call, or like, but if we go into it thinking, I can handle anything today, even if I get like my least favorite call of the day, I'm prepared, I have what I need, I'm ready to get off 3 hours late, you'll never be disappointed, and you'll be prepared.
Yeah, I love that mindset, and it's just I recently did a post where hey, let's train ourselves to condition adversity. Like adversity is
Yes.
awesome, and then if not that much crud is thrown at you, like cool, like that was easy day.
Right. And then you
Um,
have a great day.
yeah, like it's that saying, right? Like hope is not a strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what are you going to actually do to prepare? And yeah, even in that last example, if you're visiting somebody that's at the hospital, like instead of flowers, maybe bring them some food, right? Some,
Yes.
um, when my daughter was born, like I went a block once there was a break. I went
Hmm.
across the way and went to the grocery store and got some almonds, got some nice fresh deli meat and some
Hmm.
fruit, and I was just like, man, I'm like on cloud nine, like I got all this good stuff, and that was a good start to the inevitable combating the dad bod and all the struggles of
Starting on a high
trying
note.
to be
Yeah.
trying to be a busy parent and getting it in, but yeah, you talk about shame, and I think that's such a big piece. Like, how often does that come up? Is it like always a thing with people you're working with? Because I could sense that that's a huge thing that we often don't talk about. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, in first responder community in general, but then specifically in addressing healthy habits or wanting to get back on the right track.
Yeah. That's a great question, because every single client, I've been doing this. I started my business 2 years ago, but I have been working with people one on one for the past 5 years. And every single client that I've ever worked with has had some sort of pattern of disordered eating, either they were aware of or they weren't.
Hmm.
And so a huge part of what I do in my business is identifying that with them and teaching them how to combat that and find alternatives for those negative feelings. Because the problem with a negative feeling is you're going to try to cope with that negative feeling with the way that you tried to fix it with. So if you are eating poorly and then you feel shame for that, you're probably going to then eat poorly to make you feel better about the shame that you're feeling. And then that is that disordered eating cycle that's seemingly never ending. And you try to fast and it doesn't work. You feel shame, you can't do it. And it's just over and over and over again. And so that happens a lot because people have the best of intentions. Like everyone knows that they should be eating healthy. They know that they should be probably doing better. And then they try, and then whatever they tried, they failed at, and then that has a negative emotion attached to it, and they're not taught how to in that moment soothe themselves and pick an ulterior to what the poor habit that they're trying to fix in the first place that's going to help them cope with the negative emotion.
Yeah, yeah, I love that you hit that, and I think even since the time I was like a teenager, they're talking about how boys and men can have eating disorders, and the classic example is like the wrestling team and having to make
Mm,
weight, and but it's very much a thing, and I'm glad you talk about it because I'll say that the disordered eating I think is a phrase that people should be familiar with, right? It's not to say you have an eating disorder, but it's to say there are some levels of unhealthy relationships with food or eating patterns. And I've been that one where most people that worked with me a number of years know that I go hard in the paint. So it's
yeah.
it's all or nothing. And some people that don't know me as well think that I'm so rigid and I'm so disciplined. I'm actually arguably it's the reason why at times I abstain from the donuts in the break room or because I'm not disciplined, right? It's because if I cut a quarter off and I eat it when nobody's around at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm probably gonna come back and I'm probably gonna have two
Yeah.
donuts by myself. But I
Yes.
will say full disclosure, I've been that guy that at in the middle of the night just fatigued and then I crushed multiple donuts and then I felt guilty. One, I felt bad. My stomach felt bad, and my head,
Yeah.
I felt all the sugar rush,
Physically,
and I was
yeah.
like, well, I got to go put this to work. And then I'm out in the parking garage doing stairs,
Hmm.
and there's nothing wrong with doing so. I'm a huge proponent do so activity, and if
Yeah.
you again. If you have a treat and you're like, you know what, I could get a good lift in, right? Like deadlifts and donuts kind of thing.
Right.
Cool. But where I was not a healthy place or space mentally. I was feeling guilt and I was
Yeah.
trying to erase this thing, right? So shame. And so I share that just to say, hey guys, regardless of where you're at, whether you're the super basically working towards a physique thing and you feel this intense guilt, hey, that's human. like let's not punish yourself. Let's get back on the train, right? Get
Yeah.
back to those small steps that we started the whole episode off with.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, full disclosure, I tell all of my clients this. There's nothing that they could do that I haven't done. Like
Mm,
everything that you just said, same. Like that has been me. I've learned through massive error, massive trial and error. And the exercise compensation for eating something bad is so common. And you're right, like shift just that little mindset shift of like, I just ate donuts. I'm not gonna feel bad about it. I'm gonna use these carbs to go get a massive pump,
hmm
like just that kind of positive energy is gonna lessen the chance of you feeling something negative and trying to cope with like eating in excess. And it can rewire like your relationship with exercise too, because exercise shouldn't be used as punishment, it should be
right.
used for compensation. So I love that little switch.
Yeah, and that's huge. And I like one thing that helped me. This little tip was, and there's a dude I worked with for years, and I love that he can cite this and quote this because he's definitely made it part of his mantra. But we look at things in the break room, but if somebody's wife who's like kind of known as like the departmental like cookie guru, if those cookies come in, like I'm probably gonna have one, but I know myself enough to be like, hey, like this is gonna be awesome. I'm gonna enjoy this, but I don't need two or three. Like
Right.
one, I want to share with other people, so that's a good virtue, right? And the second thing is like, hey, I can moderate because I
Yeah.
started saying like I'm an extreme kind of all or nothing, but no, I have it in me to enjoy one cookie. Um, Whereas if it's just a box of cookies from like the kind of
Uh-huh.
mid-level grocery store thing and they kind of look dry, like we've had this conversation where I was like, hey, like I actually got it from my wife, so credit to her, where she's like, I know how that tastes, I know how that feels, and it's not great. It's like it's okay, and I'm
Hmm.
not really going to enjoy it for like the calories associated,
It's not
right?
worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
worth it. And so like I literally that little twist to pass it on to my buddy, and like we have the same conversation every so often when something's in the break room. He's like, yeah, I know how that tastes, and I'm not really that jazzed about it. Like I'm
That's
gonna,
awesome.
yeah. So I throw that
Making
out
that like,
for
yeah,
people.
like a shift wide kind of mindset is awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Like, what
Um,
is it bringing you? Yeah, what's the
yeah.
purpose?
Yeah. What's the purpose is kind of what I tell my clients too, because oftentimes they'll be like, Anna, I'm going out with this weekend, or like I have a kid's birthday party, or, some kind of special occasion is coming, or, they'll text me and they'll be like, Anna, like my favorite restaurant catered for lunch today or whatever. And I'll be like, okay, here's what I want you to think about. Like, are you going to remember this food a week from now, 2 months from now, or a year from now? If this specific occasion and this specific food you will remember, then it is worth you enjoying and being present and like enjoying that experience with people, because food is definitely social, it's definitely cultural, it's an
Hmm.
experience. So experiencing that with people, if that's worth it for you, then do it. But if it's like the little like snacks here and there. It's those empty calories, like you're walking by a bowl of chips and you're just like, people reach in and grab a handful and walk. It's those kinds of things where you just want to stop, be present. Am I going to remember this food tonight, tomorrow, next week, 2 months, a year from now? And if the answer is no, then you have the power to walk away, because it's, again, like you said, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, and that yeah, there's so many like ways to dissect that because if it is your favorite restaurant, like okay, like what are your favorite things that they make, and
Hmm.
is this catered version like is it even good or is it kind of like
Right.
reheated now? And
It's
like
probably not.
do they have your thing? And if they
Yeah.
don't, like maybe delayed gratification. Maybe that's a cue to like, hey, you know what? I need a date night with my BFF, right? And we're gonna go next week and go get the actual thing like hot, off the griddle
Hmm.
or what have you, right? Um,
Hmm.
like I want the sizzling fajita plate, and this is not
Yeah.
that in the break room.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that delayed gratification, man, that's a good one. Like we seek immediate gratification, and we're trying to escape our reality sometimes with food. And so, but that, I think that has so much hold over us when we're not present, like when we're not thinking like in the moment, like, is this really going to help me, or is this going to have a negative effect, or do I really need this? Is this going to like get me towards my goals or away from my goals. And delaying the gratification and saying like, okay, I'm allowed to want this and crave this, but it would be so much more meaningful if like I planned to have this with my wife or my spouse or whatever this weekend, and I can still have it. It's not like I can never have this ever again. We don't have to have that scarcity mindset. A lot of people will see like some kind of food and think, oh, well, I have to have this now because who knows when I'll have it again or whatever. Or, who knows when I'll be able to eat again. Like, no, like we're good. We're not, there's no scarcity. Like we have plenty of food. We have the ability to delay the gratification and even experience even more things in a later date.
Yeah. Well, that's huge. We spend so much time, and I know that we could go back into all these things, and maybe we'll have to revisit it in another
Yeah.
episode or like an IG live or something.
Uh-huh.
But I do have to ask you about the tactical athlete stuff. There's a lot of content that you have where you're at the range, right? You're throwing lead
Yeah.
downstream. So like,
Yeah.
but yeah, where does that come from? Was that yeah, I guess where does that come from?
Yeah. So I guess I've always kind of had an interest in firearms. I never considered it in my profession, I guess. But it was always something like growing up again. Like I handled a gun at a very young age, went hunting with my dad. And then it wasn't until recently, though, within the past couple of years when I started my business, that I started getting people coming to me like as clients and saying like, "Hey, I need you to help me prepare for this or that. Like
Mhm.
I'm a police officer. I need you to help me with this." Or I had clients come to me and say, "Hey, like I'm preparing for this thing called the tactical games.
Yeah.
I'm preparing for this run and gun or this two gun event." And I was literally like, "What is that? That
Mm,
sounds so fun and so up my alley. Like, are you kidding me? I get to run around, pick things up, and shoot stuff. Like, please tell me more."
yeah.
So I
You're
had
training for the
honestly,
apocalypse. Yeah.
oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's so functional to me. Like, I also have a deep, deep, deep love for CrossFit. And so I just like, I really love being able to jump high, run fast, run for a long time, lift heavy, do gymnastic skills, but also like, being able to do that under fatigue, but also like with those fine motor skills of like with a firearm to me is just so practical. And it's like so cool to be like stress shooting because then like, and I don't know, I mean, I'm preaching the choir here, but like, in real life scenario, you're not going to have like a low heart rate when like something comes down and you're going to have to like act on it. So like the
Right.
stress shooting part, I just thought was like so cool. And so being exposed to that sport through my clients has been so fun. And so very recently have I started competing and doing that. Um, and typically I do like some rifle pistol competitions is what I've
Yeah.
done. Yeah.
That's very cool, and I love how you're just like intrigued. You're like, "What is this?" And then you just dive in. One, like
Yeah.
in addition to just feeding your own curiosity and interest and passion, like it makes it you have the cultural relevancy to know what it is and experience that, so that you can better adequately coach people. And certainly, there's like probably just so much more that you learn from working with all kinds of first responders, right? Those that are armed and
Yeah.
might have to consider that type of angle now that you felt that what it's like to be literally physically fatigued and have to manage like
Yeah.
accuracy, and it better informs you to give the kind of recommendations you do in far as far as
Yes.
training or nutrition.
Yes, a huge part of like my business philosophy and my motto has been be an asset, not a liability. And so like physically, I've kind of applied that with like nutrition and fitness. I never want to be that person that like is lagging behind, can't lift my luggage over my head in the airplane or, carry a backpack, across a long period of time or whatever, or carry a person. Like I do ocean rescue too. And so carrying people out of the water has been something that I've had to learn to do. And then, so the appeal in these tactical fitness competitions with learning how to think, with a firearm in your hand and like how to adapt to your environment with your heart rate up, just kind of again still like very very much up my alley and with how I want my business to be run.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Anna, we've covered so much ground. I love this conversation. Like I said, I could nerd out for a lot longer, probably another hour or two. Um, but if you could share anything that you want to wrap with, as well as where listeners can find you on social media and get in contact with you for your services, and maybe expand to the types of services that you offer.
Yeah, so I think like when it comes to any shift worker or busy individual, the biggest piece of advice that I give people is just something's better than nothing. Being a perfectionist is going to get you nowhere. So give yourself some grace. You do a really tough job. Someone's got to do it and you're doing it. And so you're a badass and keep acting like it. What I do is one-on-one fitness nutrition coaching. So I personalize every program. I've never given the same program twice because the purpose of my programs is to educate people so that they are never confused about their nutrition, their fitness ever again, and they're able to maintain their results over a long period of time, ideally for the rest of their life. Like they'll be able to troubleshoot weight loss, troubleshoot muscle gain. Like I really want it to be an experience kind of like going to your physical therapist where they heal you so that you never have to come back. Or, I want my program to be the last program that someone ever purchases or ever has to, because there's so much education and resources that's given to them. So you can find me at Anna Alpha Fit on Instagram. That's where I do a lot of my business. I do have a website launching here soon. It is called Alpha Training Project. So that is the official name of my business. And send me a DM, and that's typically how I communicate. So
Awesome. So yeah. Anna, it's ANA, and then is there an underscore?
Oh, okay. Yes, it's Anna_Alpha Fit.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and wisdom with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. This is so fun to get to know you and talk about all the stuff that we both care so much about.
All right. We'll have to collaborate again.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.